Hello, welcome to The Real Bit Wars. First of all, I gotta apologize, we haven't had a lot of updates lately. I can promise you there are plenty of irons in the fire where there's a lot of stuff that we are working on. There will be plenty of videos coming out pretty quick here. Today I just wanted to take the time to just kind of recommend a few things for you, some video game related stuff. I actually read a couple of books lately, and I also watched a couple of movies that were all video game related. And it was really good stuff. So we'll start with the books here. First of all, I have Console Wars by Blake J. Harris. First thing I gotta tell you is when I finished this, immediately I thought, wow, this would make a really good movie. And it turns out that they're talking about turning this into a movie. As you can imagine, it focuses very heavily on the 16-bit era and the battle between Sega and Nintendo. There's a man by the name of Tom Kalinske who was the head of Sega. It's kind of his side of the story, but with that being said, it definitely gives due to the other powerhouses of the era, you know, NEC, Nintendo, Sony, and all I can really say is, even if you're not really that big into retro gaming, you will probably enjoy this book. So I strongly recommend checking this out. I don't want to go too much into detail, but definitely a good read. The other book is called Service Games, The Rise and Fall of Sega by Sam Pettis. This was actually something he started back in the days of the Dreamcast, and it was just published, I believe, in 2013, was it? This one, gotta say, not quite as good as Console Wars. You'll notice I got plenty of games sitting behind me here. I just wanted to point out that although growing up I was definitely a Nintendo guy, what you might call a fanboy, I definitely loved Sega back then as well as now, and I collect for pretty much every Sega console there is. So I just wanted to get that in the clear before I start pointing out the things I don't like about this. Number one is it's very biased in favor of Sega, as you can imagine. But it just kind of uses this opportunity, this book, to sort of take these cheap shots at Nintendo, and I really didn't care for that for obvious reasons. For a book that gets very technical, I mean, there's like hardware spec sheets and sales charts and stuff within the pages of this book. And for it to resort to kind of this childish, you know, name calling and just sort of jabs below the belt towards Nintendo, I didn't really understand that at all. I would have rather just seen little to no mention of Nintendo whatsoever. With that being said, it's definitely good. If you're a Sega fan, without question, you should read this one. And even if you're more partial to Nintendo or something else, Sony, NEC, or whatever, it's still pretty fun to read. But this is kind of for the die-hard retro gamer, more so. Whereas Console Wars was just an all-around good book, very well written. You'll find a lot of like typos, and there are things that are repeated, I mean literally within a few pages of each other, and the same exact thing gets repeated. And for a book that was worked on for over a decade, you would think they would have had enough time to fine-tune it and proofread and work out more of those little imperfections. So I don't want to continue bashing this, because I definitely do recommend it. Anyone like me, if you are a retro gamer, like I said, definitely a good book, and I strongly recommend checking it out. So on to the movies. Number one, we have Video Games, the movie. This is fantastic. Okay, I rented this, watched it. Immediately I went out and bought the DVD, and then I watched it a second time right away. This was actually produced by Zach Braff, and it's narrated by Sean Austin, who does just a phenomenal job. He really does a good job. This is the most in-depth history of video games that I've ever seen in my life. It's just very well put together. Most people think of the dawn of video games as like the pre-8-bit era, and people debate on when the origins of video gaming was. This actually kind of takes a step back from that even, and goes in depth with, you know, the dawn of computers in general, basically. I couldn't recommend this enough. Again, I don't want to go too in depth with any of this. It's just a real quick update. I just wanted to recommend these things to you. But I love a good documentary, regardless of what it's about. This is an excellent documentary about something I'm passionate about, so it's just really phenomenal. It's fun to watch. The other movie I wanted to recommend, another documentary. I don't own a physical copy of it. I actually watched it on Netflix, of all things. It's called Atari Game Over. You might have heard stuff about this. I'll definitely pick up a copy because I thought it was excellent. There were all these stories floating around for decades about a landfill with millions of ET cartridges for the 2600. This was originally slated to just be a documentary about the excavation in the landfill to try and unearth these Atari cartridges. And as it turns out, they found them. I don't want to spoil it, but you probably heard about it in the news already. They uncovered all these cartridges. It was not millions, it was more like thousands. And they were not all ET, actually. There were other games in there, such as Raiders of the Lost Ark, you know, best sellers on the 2600. So this whole myth of ET being like the worst game ever, they just tried to dispel that and just erase this whole myth. Basically, from what I've heard, they decided to change this into a full-on Atari documentary, which is a really good move. Although I enjoy the whole archaeological dig trying to uncover these Atari cartridges, that was not enough to carry the movie on its own. That was something that could have been summed up in probably like a 10-minute YouTube video. So this whole history of the company, of Atari, really makes this documentary well worth watching. You may have heard of a man named Howard Scott Warshaw, who developed E.T. as well as the aforementioned Raiders of the Lost Ark, Yar's Revenge. Every game he developed for the 2600 was basically a million seller. They were all hit games. So E.T. was kind of the black sheep of this. It stood out and it's, you know, widely considered to be a bad game. And it's really kind of sad how that one flop sort of destroyed his career in the industry. It never recovered and he really hasn't been a part of game development ever since. So it's a shame that this happened to him, because it's a man that definitely deserves credit. You know, they should really be handing him a Lifetime Achievement Award rather than shunning him from the industry because of that one game. And mind you, he developed it by himself in about 5 weeks, which is pretty impressive when you think about it. Most games are done by multiple people and take more to the effect of 5 months to develop. So he definitely deserves a lot more credit than what he gets. He does not deserve to be criticized for that one game that was a flop. Really, not that bad of a game. Not the worst game ever. Not even close. Alright, so before I wrap it up here, there's one more thing I wanted to mention, and that is Angry Video Game Nerd, the movie. You've probably heard of the guy. I don't want to do a review of it here just now. It's too soon. I just watched it. I would like to watch it, you know, 1 or 2 more times before I really have anything important to say about it. But I'm assuming you've probably heard of the AVGN. But if you have not, just shut this video off right now, go grab a beer, and head over to cinemassacre.com. The man is a huge inspiration to us here, as well as the vast majority of YouTube game reviewers out there. You probably know about that already. But with that being said, a lot of us owe very much to him. So go check his stuff out. Even if you have seen them all, just go watch some of his videos. The man deserves it. He's definitely a legend in his own time. But thank you very much for watching The Real Bit Wars. I'm Chris, and like I said, stay tuned because in the near future we definitely will have some very good stuff for you. Thanks for watching.